And so, as I was saying in part one, it's very understandable, and you can see where this sort of friction between men and women come from when women are reacting to, pretty innocuous conversation, anything but total subservience. So the only thing for them that was correct for her to do was to completely scold him for, again, speaking about his own reality. Like I said, they're not actually denying that reality is true. They're just saying, actually, if the reality is true, it's because men, are the, reasons why that is. Whatever that the case may be, he's 17, he's not the one actually, doing that thing. And then the other part of it is what this means for, what we call Nigerian feminism, which is that if all your feminism is just doing like gotcha responses to try and dunk on the fact that people are not sufficiently, scolding the male species to love women better, then what are you actually doing? Luckily, there are enough people calling out the madness of their response, but social media generally is becoming more and more like this. And, people are talking about incel and incel culture and incel behavior. Nothing turns people faster, especially teenage boys, to people like Andrew Tate, who's a fool in any regard response and not that smart and not even that influential. But nothing turns them to people like that faster than this kind of response. Because even from these so-called feminists, the mom's response, it might not be the most perfect thing in the world, but by no means was it like a negative thing. She's just trying to understand, the reality of dating in that age range, same as anyone else, because she doesn't seem that aware of it. And so if anything, as a feminist, it was actually a teachable moment, to talk about the fact that the country is exceedingly poor. And so social mobility is the biggest reason why people are looking to enter into romantic, long-lasting relationships, because you can't really date for love anymore. It's too expensive to date for love. And that could have been a very interesting societal critique. What does poverty do to the social fabric of a country? That's why a country like Nigeria and a country like the UK have different dating cultures. That's so you find that if someone comes here and lives here for a couple of years, going to marry someone back home might not really work for them, because now they realize that actually what we're doing in Nigeria was a bit strange, and that's because of the effects of poverty. So obviously we talk about poverty from an effect of the economic and financial standpoint, but this is also something that's actually very profound, and I've thought about for a long time. Like, what does that do to the psyche of someone? Like, if you can't even have your most fundamental needs met, how do you then start to think in such a higher way, where stuff like love, you can actually dare to dream about what does it feel like to be in true love, But for many people living in that reality, that will never be something they even get to experience or taste. And if you think about what we are as humans and our, overwhelmingly strong desire naturally for attachment and contact, that's actually a very sad thing. Not only am I too poor to afford, many of life's necessities and might never taste them, I also might never experience true love because I live in a country that's simply too poor and doesn't afford me the opportunity to actually go for that truly. And that's a tragedy for the men and the women, right? Because these women are understandably trying to date someone with money because they don't have any. But also these men, the little money they do have, they feel under tremendous financial pressure because, all the relationships are going to be centered around that. So even when they meet someone that they'll actually like and would love to, explore stuff with because of that natural connection, they actually can't do that. And so as a feminist, that to me is the rational, critique of the entire system, as opposed to calling a 17-year-old boy an incel and pretending as though, patriarchy originated with him, or as though, teenagers of today, conceivably have any actual power in, they might perpetuate patriarchy, but only because they're men. That's the other thing about this as well, which is I was going to get to. When you talk about social constructs like patriarchy, they're actually far more complex than a lot of theories of feminism, want to recognize. As humans, we're a patriarchal, species, you might say. Elephants are matriarchal, hyenas are matriarchal. Why does society actually group itself from a gender perspective in terms of patriarchy and matriarchy? How does that actually originate? There's a tweet that this girl, one of the girls that responded talked about. She said, "Oh, people are talking about patriarchy like their forefathers didn't design the system, blah blah blah." Again, it's such a simplistic way of viewing the social construct, because it just gives these men too much credit. No actual man or group of men sat around and thought, "Oh, let's form a society like this where men have all the power and women don't." I promise you, that was not their intention. No one is smart enough to think about the world in that way. And not necessarily, why would they even think about it in terms of men and women? Like, what necessarily do they have with these men for them to say, enough common cause to make the society? A lot of what we see in terms of patriarchy and matriarchy are things that are just, small cultures that gradually perpetuate themselves a lot of time naturally, due to the acts of the men and the women. Now, of course, we can't deny and say like it has benefited the men more than the women. That's a fact. But the idea that it's a kind of conscious thing that's done and perpetuated, like every man has a hand in it. If you're a child growing up, I'm a bit older now. As a child growing up, there was no meeting that I had with other men to talk about how we enjoy the fruits of patriarchy together. We are, and this boy, and I guess this feminist as well, we are all, victims and products of our society, for better or for worse. And so that's the more curious way to explore this. And when you explore it in this just, childish and immature way, you're actually doing, not yourself and also the theory a disservice, because this does not promote, feminism in the country. Calling a 17-year-old boy who's observing his reality, which reality is, a reality that you also share because you live in the same country, calling him an incel because he's just simply speaking on and commenting on his reality does not help, the cause of feminism. But the last thing I would say on that is that I do somewhat understand it, because if you're a woman living in this system, yes, I can sound and wax poetically about the curious and very intellectual ways to dissect and observe and understand something like patriarchy. But if you are the victim of this and you're sometimes being assaulted on public transport, being groped, or gender violence and things like that, it's very hard for you to then start talking about feminist theories and start writing volumes of encyclopedic kind of knowledge about it, because your immediate reaction to that is anger, and righteous anger, understandably so, because of the victimhood status you currently I won't say enjoy you currently suffer, let's say that. So that's the last thing I'll say on that, is that while I do sound quite critical of her and people like her, I do understand that because of the position they're in, the natural kind of sense for that is anger, and so ultimately that's where I'll leave that. Tell me what you guys think of this discourse, if you come across it, if you're in Nigeria. What's your thoughts on feminism, patriarchy, things like that, and what was your thoughts on the actual encounter itself? Thank you for watching, and I'll speak to you guys soon.